The wind cut through the narrow streets of downtown Boston, carrying the damp scent of recent rain and freshly brewed coffee. Daniel Reed walked slowly, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, eyes wandering over the red brick buildings that had witnessed so much of his life. That morning, every breath felt heavier than the last. He clutched his phone, which had been buzzing incessantly over the past few days. Unanswered messages, missed calls, but it wasn't the appointments or reminders that weighed on him the most. It was the echo of his own words. Over the years, Daniel had realized that, more often than not, his words had caused more harm than good. Thoughtless remarks, spoken in the heat of the moment, had torn apart relationships, pushed friends away, and strained family bonds. And now, after the divorce, the lost conversations with Emily, and the isolation he had cultivated himself, he felt the weight of every poorly chosen syllable. He crossed the central square, where the water of a freshly cleaned fountain reflected the gray sky, and sat on a bench. Pulling out his phone, he read once more a message from his daughter. "Dad, sorry I didn't call. Been busy with exams. I'll try to visit next month." Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to respond with words full of affection, but fear of appearing weak held him back. Instead, he typed something neutral. "Cold. Proud of you. Take care." He sighed. How many times had he done this? Repressed feelings, swallowed emotions, let unspoken words corrode his soul. The memory came sharply. An old argument with his ex-wife, where one harsh sentence, spoken without thought, had triggered the divorce. The past lived in every word that could never be taken back. As he walked toward work, Daniel passed a neighbor who gave him a timid wave. "Morning, Daniel." "Morning, Tom." A conversation lasting seconds, yet the feeling of disconnection lingered. Daniel realized that even the simplest greetings no longer carried weight in his life. His words had become mere sounds, without intention, without purpose. At the office, Daniel encountered Linda Harper, his longtime colleague. She carried a report and looked at him with eyes that seemed to pierce through his facade. "You okay, Daniel?" she asked. "I'm," he replied, but the hesitation in his voice said everything. Linda sighed. "Sometimes the words you don't say weigh more than the ones you do. Remember that." He just nodded. A simple sentence, yet it echoed in his mind for hours. By the end of the day, after an exhausting routine with nothing new, Daniel walked to the Charles River Bridge. The water reflected the dark, heavy sky, and the constant flow seemed to mirror the rhythm of his thoughts. He remembered Ryan, the young man he had met on the bridge weeks ago, and the words they had exchanged. Ryan had lost everything, yet still managed to say something simple, human, that resonated within him. Maybe you haven't lost everything. Daniel closed his eyes and whispered to himself, almost unconsciously, "Maybe I can change." It was at that moment, gazing at the city's reflection in the water, that Daniel realized words held real power. They could hurt, push away, but also rebuild, heal, and reconnect. He felt determination slowly grow within him. It was time to face what he had been avoiding, acknowledge his mistakes, choose his words intentionally, and reconnect with those who mattered. And then, almost like an omen, his phone buzzed again. A new message appeared, unexpected. "Daniel, I know you've been avoiding talking to me, but we need to have a conversation. Linda." A mix of anxiety and hope ran through him. Daniel took a deep breath. This would be the first of many important conversations. Conversations that would require courage to speak, listen, and accept the truth. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt that he was at the beginning of something meaningful. The words he chose from that moment on would not be empty sounds. They would be seeds,
capable of transforming his world if used wisely and intentionally. The rain began again, light and almost imperceptible. He lifted his face to the sky, letting each drop remind him of a silent promise. Choose my words carefully. Speak the truth. Speak to build. Daniel Reed's journey had only just begun, and each step now carried not only the weight of the past, but the hope of a future where his words would make a difference. And in that moment, he realized something that would change everything. The way we speak can rebuild lives, including our own.
If you want to learn how to use your words to transform your life, subscribe to the channel now and follow this story to the end. Daniel Reed's days remained predictable, yet the inner weight continued to grow. He woke early, made coffee, skimmed the news on his phone, and walked Boston's streets on autopilot, almost mechanically. The world carried on, but for Daniel, every missed conversation, every unspoken word, every thoughtless remark from the past seemed to echo like a painful whisper. He often thought of Emily, calls he didn't answer, advice he didn't give, and especially the small words of affection he had let slip away out of fear or pride. Each verbal absence felt like an invisible wall pushing him further from the daughter he loved. At the office, the routine seemed endless. Colleagues exchanged quick greetings, laughed at shallow jokes, discussed projects, while Daniel remained silent, observing, reflecting. Words once used to build relationships now felt futile. He knew their power and feared using them wrong again. Linda Harper, however, continued to notice his state. One day, she approached him with a serious look. "Daniel, don't you see you're isolating yourself? Your words matter, no matter how small they seem. They shape the world around you." He sighed, guilt mixing with shame. "I know, but sometimes it feels like everything I say comes out wrong. My words just push people away." "Or maybe you're just afraid to try again," she said with a small smile. At that moment, something shifted inside him. He realized that fear of speaking, the risk of hurting or being hurt, had become an almost insurmountable barrier. Yet there was a simple truth. Saying nothing had consequences too. Every silence, every omission left invisible scars. At home, Daniel began reflecting on his own story. He remembered arguments with his ex-wife, the times thoughtless words had hurt more than any action. Every sentence spoken in anger, sarcasm, or indifference left lasting marks. And over the past months, the weight of unspoken words had piled up like stones on his chest. He decided to start a simple but difficult exercise, recording each important word he spoke or considered speaking and analyzing whether it was constructive or destructive. The next morning, Daniel woke early and walked to the cafe where he always had coffee. He grabbed a notebook and pen. Every thought that crossed his mind had to be evaluated. Will what I'm about to say build or destroy? Will it help someone or just soothe my own ego? Is it loaded with anger, fear, or sadness? As he wrote, he thought of Ryan, the young man on the bridge. The words they had exchanged, though few, carried intention and empathy. Daniel realized that the difference between words that hurt and words that heal lay in the consciousness with which they were spoken. Later, during lunch, Daniel received a call from Emily. She sounded nervous but eager. "Hi, Dad. I just wanted to hear your voice." His heart raced. He hesitated for a moment, remembering so many conversations cut short by pride or fear. But then he took a deep breath and spoke sincerely. "Emily, I'm glad you called. I've missed hearing your voice." She smiled on the other end, and for a few minutes, Daniel felt something he hadn't in months: genuine connection through words. Back at work, Daniel shared an idea during a meeting.
He hesitated before speaking, but then he remembered Linda and Ryan. Words have power when spoken with intention. He spoke clearly, calmly, and purposefully. The impact was immediate. Colleagues responded positively, and the tension he usually felt when expressing himself disappeared, if only temporarily. At the end of the day, Daniel walked to the Central Park. He watched families, friends, and children playing. He realized that every interaction was an opportunity for rebuilding, healing, and connecting. Every word had the potential to change relationships, restore trust, or inspire someone to move forward. He sat on a bench, opened his notebook, and wrote, "Today I realize that every word I speak is a seed. I can choose to plant anger or love, fear or courage. I can choose to create distance or build bridges. And every choice shapes not only my life, but the lives of those around me." Looking at the gray sky, he took a deep breath. For the first time, he didn't feel trapped by the past. It wasn't just about controlling words, it was about recognizing their power and responsibility and using them consciously to transform his life and the lives of those he loved. That night, before bed, he practiced a simple but powerful exercise, speaking positive words to himself in the mirror, words of encouragement, gratitude, and forgiveness. Each phrase was difficult at first, but after minutes, he felt an internal shift, small yet meaningful. I can do better. I will speak with purpose. I can rebuild what was broken. Daniel closed his eyes, realizing that for the first time in years, his words would no longer be mere sounds in the void. They would be tools of reconstruction, bridges over silence, seeds of change. And as the city slept, he understood that this was only the beginning. Every conversation, every phone call, every word spoken or deliberately left unspoken would be a step toward a more conscious, connected, and meaningful life.
If this story is inspiring you, click subscribe to follow each chapter of this personal transformation journey. That Friday morning, Boston felt quieter than usual. The sky was overcast, and the gray light reflected off the old buildings, giving the city an introspective air. Daniel Reed walked to work as usual, but there was something different in his step, a mix of anxiety and anticipation. He didn't know exactly why, but he felt something was about to happen. When he arrived at the office, an unexpected meeting awaited him. His manager, Mr. Thompson, a strict, direct man, stood beside a visitor, an external consultant, Sarah Collins, confident and sharp-eyed. "Daniel, we need to discuss a recent report," Mr. Thompson began. "But first, I want you to meet Sarah. She'll conduct a critical analysis of communication within the team." Daniel swallowed hard. Communication. Words. This was exactly the area he had been trying to rebuild in his own life. A shiver ran down his spine. Coincidence or irony? Sarah opened her laptop and began displaying charts and internal emails. "Many of the team's issues come from communication failures, poorly chosen words, misinterpretations, or simply the absence of words. Messages that could have prevented conflicts if expressed clearly." Daniel's heart raced. Every word she spoke seemed to reflect his own past. The arguments with his ex-wife, the misunderstandings with Emily, every sentence spoken in anger or fear. Midway through the meeting, Sarah asked a direct question. "Daniel, could you share an example of a situation where you realized your words had a real impact, positive or negative?" Silence filled the room. Everyone looked at him. Each second stretched the pressure. Daniel felt the weight of his past words, but also an opportunity to show he had learned something. He took a deep breath, recalling his most recent lesson. Words are seeds, and we can choose what to plant. "There was a time," he began, voice steady but full of emotion, "when I didn't realize the impact of my words. A sentence said in anger drove away people I loved.
Today, I try to speak with intention, to choose my words carefully, and to recognize that each word has the power to build or destroy." The room was silent. Sarah nodded with a nearly imperceptible smile. "Thank you, Daniel. That's exactly what we're talking about: awareness and intention." In that moment, Daniel realized this meeting wasn't just a professional evaluation, it was a mirror of his own life, a reminder that he could no longer ignore the power of words. Later that day, as he reviewed reports, he received an unexpected call. Emily. She was crying, clearly upset. "Dad, I don't know how to say this. I had a fight with my roommate, and I felt so lost. I didn't know who to talk to." Daniel felt a mix of fear and opportunity. Every word could comfort or worsen the situation. He remembered the exercise he had been practicing. Listen, choose words carefully, speak with intention. "Emily, listen to me. I'm here. Tell me everything." For almost an hour, Daniel listened to his daughter vent without interrupting, without judgment, offering only words of support and empathy. At the end of the conversation, Emily spoke more calmly. "Thank you, Dad. I feel better." Daniel hung up and exhaled. For the first time in a long while, he felt the real impact of well-chosen words. It wasn't just about correcting past mistakes, it was about building bridges, healing wounds, and inspiring trust. That same day, a team-wide meeting ended in a transformative way. Daniel realized he could be a voice of mediation, a model of conscious communication. He began intervening in discussions with empathy, reframing criticisms constructively, and reinforcing positive messages. The difference was immediate. The team's atmosphere shifted, and his colleagues began valuing each word spoken. At the end of the day, Daniel walked to the park where he usually wrote in his notebook. He sat on a bench, watching the sun fight through the clouds. He grabbed his pen and wrote, "Today I realized that life always gives us moments of choice. Words can hurt, or they can heal. They can push away, or they can bring closer. And I choose to build, heal, and connect." The wind carried the scent of spring flowers. Daniel closed his eyes, letting each sensation connect with his new understanding. Controlling the mouth, choosing words with intention, was not just an exercise in discipline, but an act of self-respect and responsibility towards others. Before standing, he looked at the sky and whispered, "From now on, my words will carry purpose." In that moment, Daniel Reed felt his life was changing course. The turning point had arrived, not through external events, but through recognizing the power his words held over himself and the world around him. For the first time in a long while, he didn't just speak, he chose his words consciously, ready to rebuild his life and reconnect with those who truly mattered. Remember, your words have power. To keep learning and stay inspired, subscribe to the channel and share this story with someone who needs to hear it.
The day dawned cold and overcast in Boston. Daniel Reed hurried along the wet brick streets, feeling the weight of the decision that awaited him. The cafe where he usually wrote, reflected, and watched the city would be the stage for what could be the greatest test of his words yet. Seated at his usual table, he waited for Ryan, the young man he had met weeks ago on the bridge. Ryan was going through a tough time, on the verge of losing his job and facing family tensions. Their last conversation had left Daniel deep in thought. Words can hurt, but they can also rebuild. Ryan arrived, nervous, sitting silently. Daniel took a deep breath and began the conversation.
Ryan, I know you're going through a lot, but I want you to know everything we talked about before, every piece of advice, every word, it's not just theory. Words have power. They can destroy, but they can also heal. Ryan looked at him skeptically. Words, they didn't help me much before. I lost everything. Daniel nodded. He knew that words without intention were useless. It was time to show the real power of conscious communication. Then let's try something different today, he said firmly. I want to hear everything, without judgment, and then we'll plan together how you can use your words to change your situation. For almost an hour, Daniel listened as Ryan vented about fears, regrets, and frustrations. He responded with empathy, reframing every negative comment, reinforcing strengths, showing alternatives, and reminding Ryan of the power he had to rebuild his life through conscious communication. By the end, Ryan exhaled, visibly lighter. Dad, I didn't think words could do this. They helped. Daniel smiled, moved. Ryan's transformation was a direct reflection of the lessons he himself had been learning. His words were no longer just sounds. They were tools of reconstruction, bridges between what was lost and what could be. Later that afternoon, a critical situation arose at work. An important client was angry, on the verge of canceling a contract due to a misunderstanding caused by the team's poor communication. Daniel realized the moment demanded courage. He needed to intervene and use words intentionally to save not just the contract, but the reputation and trust of everyone involved. He took a deep breath, walked into the meeting room, and began. Let's pause for a moment. I understand your frustration, and I take responsibility for the confusion. Let me clarify, step by step, and show you the solution we can provide. Throughout the conversation, Daniel carefully chose each sentence, neutral, empathetic, clear, and constructive. The client, initially tense, began to relax. The atmosphere softened. By the end, the meeting concluded with a smile and a firm handshake, turning a potential disaster into a display of trust and mutual respect. Walking out of the building, Daniel took a deep breath and realized something profound. Controlling words wasn't just about speaking. It was about living with awareness, intention, and responsibility. Every sentence could rebuild relationships, inspire trust, and create opportunities. Every word was a seed. That night, Daniel returned home to find a letter from Emily on the table. She had written, "Dad, I've been thinking about our conversation. I realized how much words matter. Thank you for listening, for being there. Love, Emily." Daniel held the letter, moved. For the first time, he didn't feel regret or emptiness. He felt connection, understanding, and hope. He finally understood words chosen carefully could transform lives. Before going to bed, he looked at the ceiling and murmured, "Every word matters. Every word can heal, build, inspire, and I choose to speak with purpose from now on." Daniel Reed had faced the peak of his challenge, controlling his mouth, choosing words with intention, and using communication as a tool for rebuilding and empathy. He knew more challenges lay ahead, but he now possessed something more powerful than any material resource: the awareness that his words could change his life and the lives of those around him. The climax was not marked by shouts or dramatic confrontations, but by the silent strength of conscious words, transforming a weary, insecure man into someone capable of building bridges, inspiring trust, and reconnecting lost bonds.
The days following the turning point were different for Daniel Reed. Boston, once cold and distant, now seemed brighter, livelier, with sounds clearer and a sense of movement matching his renewed mindset. For the first time in years, Daniel felt in control of the impact of his words. The first visible change happened at home. Every conversation with Emily was now open and honest. Words previously left unsaid, small expressions of affection or recognition, became constant. His daughter smiled more, spoke more, and their connection became tangible. Daniel realized that a simple "I love you" or "I'm proud of you" carried real power, capable of healing old wounds and strengthening bonds. At work, the transformation was evident. Daniel's team responded to him differently. His interventions no longer just solved problems, they built trust. Each meeting became an exercise in active listening, empathy, and conscious communication. Colleagues began to follow his example: clearer words, constructive feedback, respectful discussions. Without realizing it, Daniel had become a model of communicative leadership, proving that controlling one's words could positively impact everyone around. One afternoon, Linda Harper invited Daniel for a chat outside the office at a small cafe they both frequented. "You've changed," she said, smiling, "not just at work, but in how you communicate with people. Your words now carry weight, purpose, and truth." Daniel smiled, feeling the depth of her words. "I've learned that words are more than sounds. They carry intention, power, and responsibility. We can build or destroy with them, and now I want to build." That same week, Daniel received an unexpected invitation to speak at a seminar on communication and leadership. The organizers wanted someone to share personal experiences, showing the impact of words on professional and personal life. He accepted, knowing that his words could now inspire others, just as Ryan's and Linda's words had inspired him. On stage, Daniel began with a simple story from his own life: mistakes, silences, poorly chosen words, and ultimately, transformation. Every sentence was measured, intentional, full of emotion and truth. The audience responded with rapt attention, smiles, and even tears. He realized that carefully chosen words could touch hearts, something money or status could never achieve. Back in his apartment that night, Daniel looked out at the city lights. He thought of the past, the times his words hurt, the pride that silenced him, the lost opportunities. But instead of dwelling on guilt, he felt gratitude for the chance to rebuild. Every mistake, every painful silence now served as a lesson. He opened his notebook and wrote, "Words are more than communication. They are creation, bridges, and legacy. Every sentence we speak leaves a mark. Today, I choose to leave marks of love, empathy, and courage." Daniel leaned back in his chair, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. The city could continue at its fast pace, but he had finally found the rhythm of his own words, the power of speaking with intention, and the wisdom to listen before responding. Time passed, and small changes solidified. Emily began calling more often, sharing her victories and challenges. At work, Daniel became an informal mentor for new employees, teaching them about conscious communication. He repaired old strained relationships by offering words of reconciliation and gratitude. Every word spoken was now a conscious choice. Daniel learned that controlling his mouth didn't mean speaking less. It meant speaking better, with purpose and attention. Each sentence was a tool for transformation, each dialogue an opportunity to create connection and understanding. In the quiet of the night, Daniel exhaled and whispered to himself, "Words shape our reality. I will use mine wisely." And so, Daniel Reed's story entered a new chapter, not just of his life, but of his journey toward awareness and transformation. He couldn't erase the past, but from that moment on, he could choose every word, every sentence, every conversation intentionally, impacting his life and the lives of those around him. The power of speaking and of choosing the right words had finally become the legacy he wanted to leave.